Congressman Jim Cooper is one of more than 24 Democrats announcing their retirement at the end of this current session. He's also calling out the Democratic Party's failure to reach out to rural voters. In a recent interview, the congressman called his party current strategy, quote, blind hope. Cooper said partisan redistricting was behind his decision to call it quits after serving the Nashville area for nearly 2 decades. Congressman Jim Cooper is with me now. So, Congressman, you've discussed how Democrats, particularly urban Democrats, have stopped even thinking about relating to or understanding rural America. Now, just to give our audience a little bit of perspective, you're a product of Groton, University of North Carolina, Oxford, and Harvard. How did you do it?
Well, rural voters want leadership. They want somebody who understands their problems. And I was raised in a small town of about 20,000 people, Shelbyville. So that gave me roots and gave me values. And that's what rural people appreciate the most. Above all, they do not want to be talked down to, especially by anybody who went to Harvard. So I've understood that from the beginning. Right now, I largely represent Nashville, and that's a city that is larger than 7 states, larger than Wyoming, for example, or Vermont, or Montana, or South or North Dakota. But see, each of those states have 2 U.S. senators, and that gives them a huge advantage in the U.S. Senate. So in general, Democrats need to reach out to rural areas. There are no farmers markets without farmers. We got to remember that.
And is it a lack of imagination, a lack of intent, or is it kind of something worse, bordering on indifference?
Well, we've all heard about flyover country, but you're talking about the heartland of America, and that's the beating heart of this country. So we cannot and should not ever ignore it. But we probably haven't done enough to get rural broadband out to everybody. Franklin Roosevelt was able to get electricity all across America in about 10 years. We haven't been able to do that with broadband in 20. So there are other things we could be doing for rural voters, but primarily it's a values question. As Senator Moynihan said, the central conservative truth is that culture trumps politics. The central liberal truth is that politics eventually can change culture. We need to remember that.
What are your thoughts on the state of redistricting in America? By all accounts, you appear to be a victim. What is the way out or the remedy?
The Supreme Court has let everybody play politics. A few state courts have rebelled against that. But really what's happening is Democrats are not very strong in rural America. I've carried 30 counties in rural Tennessee, but right now in our polarized political environment, it's much harder to do that.
And is redistricting the reason you're not seeking re-election because the district lines are so unfamiliar to you and you simply didn't see a path forward?
Absolutely. The Republican legislature took one of the finest cities in America, Nashville, Tennessee, a city that had been whole for 230 years, and cut it into 3 separate parts, making it almost impossible for any Democrat to win. So they did this with deliberate intent. They knew what they were doing to destroy our state capital, and they're succeeding.
Let me change the focus of this conversation for a minute, Congressman. We've known each other for a long time. I know you're a student of history, of Congress. You've served during several presidencies. You came to Congress the first time. You've had 2 different stints when the Cold War was still hot. So for the audience's benefit, describe this moment in history as you see it, Russia and Ukraine.
Vladimir Putin is playing the best of a terrible hand. His country is actually shrinking in size. He's ginning up his military to be popular back home. And he's taking advantage of neighboring countries, not only like Crimea, but now Ukraine and possibly others. So we have to fight back against that. We have to fight back using NATO. And of course, Ukraine is not a NATO member, but we have to hold the values of the West against the Russian values. And what's scariest of all is a possible Russian-Chinese alliance. So their meeting in Beijing was very dangerous. This is what Richard Nixon feared, and it seems to be happening.
Should Congress pass sanctions now against Russia, even if it doesn't fully invade Ukraine? I mean, invade Ukraine, yes.
I believe we should pass sanctions now, and they should be the toughest sanctions ever. Russia doesn't understand leniency. They certainly do not understand appeasement. We cannot let them get away with this because other dominoes will fall. The next could be Taiwan, for example, with the Chinese takeover there. See, we've already kind of let Hong Kong go. We already let Crimea go. You know, we've not been firm like we should. And we've focused on a lot of minor countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. that really don't make that much difference in the world scene. Now we're talking about major power conflict, and we need to get our act together.
In that regard, Congressman, what are you expecting in the State of the Union address? And from a moderate Democrat's perspective, is there one issue, maybe two, that you want the White House to emphasize, but it might be inclined to play down or sidestep?
Well, Joe Biden is a master not only of the legislative process, but he's a moderate. He talks about Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is in the heartland more than any other town in the country. It's important that we share his values. And I think he knows that inflation is eating away at middle-class incomes. He knows that we've got to focus on issues that matter around the kitchen table. He cares about middle America more than any president we've had in a long, long time. And I think his speech will reflect that. He does a great job presenting not only the Congress, but the American public. And I think he'll do a great job during the State of the Union.
Republicans would say among the issues he might be inclined to sidestep are immigration and crime.
Well, they like to beat that drum. They like to needlessly divide the country. The truth is, as you know, Major, 5 or 6 years ago, the U.S. Senate passed a good comprehensive immigration bill with 70 votes. Both of Tennessee's Republican senators voted for that bill, but the Republicans wouldn't even allow it to come up in the House of Representatives. So that's the sort of political football they've made out of immigration. Crime, by any standard, is down way, way below 1990s levels. It has upsurged a little bit recently, probably due to COVID, but it's still far, far below what we had in the 90s and previous decades. So we need to keep that in mind, and we need to keep a lid on crime. And certainly we do not need to defund the police.
Congressman, you mentioned inflation. Many governors are looking for ways to alleviate inflation. A remedy you've seen come and go in Washington. A federal gasoline tax holiday is making the rounds again. Thoughts? Solutions?
We need to do whatever it takes to help middle-class America succeed. We cannot ever let the American dream disappear or even fade. We've got to make sure that every person in this country knows they have a bright future and that our government cares deeply about them. So yes, we can help them with household expenses. We've already given them checks during COVID, thousands of dollars each. It's incredible how helpful the government has been in recent months. We've got to make sure that people still feel the love from government because it's important to get through this crisis. We will do that. And Joe Biden is a great leader for us in this time of trouble. Yes
or no, federal gas tax holiday?
Fine with me. I'll go for it.
Simple enough. Democratic Congressman Jim Cooper of Tennessee, thanks so much.
Thank you, Major.